Before humans had calendars, the seasons were already inside them. A colder wind could change where they walked. A longer darkness could change how they slept. A returning fruit, a missing herd, a frozen river, a warmer dawn. These were not just events in nature. They were quiet lessons repeated over thousands of years. The cold truth is this: the human mind may not have learned time from clocks, but from waiting, hunger, memory, and return. If the seasons taught early humans when to move, when to rest, when to fear, and when to hope, how much of the human mind was shaped by the turning of the year? Before any human being could name spring, summer, autumn, or winter, the body already knew that the world was changing. It did not know this with words. It knew it through the skin, through the eyes, through hunger, through sleep, and through the quiet unease that came when the air began to turn. For early humans, a season was not a beautiful idea on a calendar. It was the ground becoming harder under the feet. It was the morning light arriving earlier or later. It was the taste of certain fruits disappearing from the familiar places. It was the movement of animals away from a valley that had once felt full of life. Long before people could measure a year, the year was measuring them. A colder season asked the body to spend more energy staying warm. A hotter season asked it to seek shade, water, and slower movement. A wetter season changed the smell of soil, the tracks left by animals, and the safety of crossing rivers. These changes were not small background details. They shaped where a group could rest, how far it could travel, how much food it might find, and how safely children and older people could survive. The human mind did not begin by thinking about time in numbers. It began by living inside repeated changes that mattered to survival. This is where the story of seasons and the human mind must begin. Not with belief, not with myth, not with invention, but with the body being trained by the turning world. When nights grew longer, sleep changed. When daylight returned, movement became easier. When cold winds arrived, attention turned toward shelter, fire, clothing, and the nearness of other bodies. None of this required a written calendar. It required memory, sensation, and the ability to notice that what happened before might happen again. A person who remembered where warmth could be found, where dry wood might remain, or where animals had gathered in a previous season carried something more valuable than a simple memory. That person carried a pattern of the world inside the mind. This does not mean early humans understood seasons the way later farming societies did. For most of human history, people lived by hunting, gathering, fishing, moving, watching, and adjusting. Their knowledge was practical, local, and often learned over many years. A certain plant might return after rains. A herd might pass near the same open land when the weather shifted. A river might rise when distant snow melted. A cave or rock shelter might become more important when wind and cold made open sleeping places unsafe. These were lessons of season, but they were not written down. They were held in bodies, habits, stories, paths, and shared attention. Slowly, such repeated experience could strengthen the mind's need to compare the present with the past. Is this cold like the cold before? Is this hunger the beginning of a harder time? Is this bird call, this flower, this swelling river? A sign that something is returning. The first influence of seasons on the human mind may have been this quiet pressure to notice change before it became dangerous. The body felt the change first, but the mind had to remember it, interpret it, and share it. A single cold night could be endured. A long cold season had to be understood. That difference mattered. It may have encouraged early humans to pay attention not only to what was happening now, but to what was likely to come next. In that sense, the seasons did not simply happen around the human mind. They entered the mind through repeated need. They taught the body when to conserve strength, when to search farther, when to stay close to others, and when to prepare before the world became more difficult. This was not a sudden awakening. It was a slow education carried by countless mornings, countless returns of warmth, countless losses of food, and countless nights when the sky grew dark too early. Before calendars, The seasons were already shaping the first human sense that life had rhythms larger than one day. The first lessons of the seasons were not gentle lessons. They came through limits. A human body can only stay warm for so long without enough shelter, fire, clothing, or the warmth of other people nearby. It can only walk so far under heat before thirst begins to change attention. It can only remain strong if food returns often enough to replace what movement and cold have taken away. For early humans, the changing year pressed on the body before it ever became a thought. The mind had to listen because the body could not ignore it. When cold arrived, muscles tightened. Fingers lost ease. Sleep could become lighter, especially if a group had to remain close to a fire or wake more often to watch over children, elders, or stored embers. When heat returned, the body carried a different set of instructions. Movement might shift toward cooler hours. Water became more important. Shade became a kind of safety. These were not abstract changes. They were decisions shaped by sensation, repeated again and again, until the mind began to treat certain signs as warnings, invitations, or memories of what had happened before. A darker morning was not just darker. It could mean less time to travel safely. A dry wind was not just wind. It could mean water would be harder to find, tracks would fade faster, and plants might change. A season entered thought because it entered the body first. This connection between body and season is important because it keeps the story honest. We do not need to imagine early humans sitting beneath the stars and inventing a full theory of time. More likely, the first relationship with seasons was practical, bodily, and uneven. People noticed what mattered, because not noticing could be costly. If a familiar food vanished from one place, memory had to stretch backward. Was it gone forever, or had it disappeared at this time before? If animals left a valley, the group had to remember whether they had followed the same path in a previous cycle. If cold made children weaker or elders slower, the group had to adjust its pace, its resting places, and its use of fire. In this way, the season did not only change the landscape, it changed the amount of mental work required to survive. It asked the mind to hold more than the present moment. It asked people to connect discomfort now with conditions that might continue, worsen, or eventually pass. Over time, this may have deepened one of the most important human abilities, the ability to live with a future that has not yet arrived. The body feels hunger today, but the mind begins to remember that a certain hunger may belong to a certain part of the year. The body feels cold tonight, but the mind begins to know that this cold may stay, and that staying requires preparation. The body sees light returning earlier in the morning, and the mind begins to expect more movement, more growth, more animals, more possibility. This is not a claim that seasons alone created human intelligence. Human evolution involved many forces: social life, tools, language, cooperation, changing climates, and long childhoods, among others. But seasons gave those forces a repeating structure. They made change come back. They made absence return. They made difficulty temporary, but also predictable. That predictability mattered. A danger that repeats can become a lesson. A food that returns can become a remembered promise. A cold that passes can become a reason to endure. For a mind shaped by daily survival, these repeating changes could slowly form a deeper sense of pattern. The world was not random in every direction. Some things disappeared and came back. Some hardships arrived with signs before them. Some relief could be expected, though never guaranteed. This is where the seasons may have begun to influence human emotion as well as human thought. Fear was not only fear of an animal in the dark. It could be fear of a long cold period beginning. Hope was not only hope for food today. It could be the remembered possibility that warmth, fruit, or moving herds might return. The human mind, living clo. There is another reason the body matters so much in this story. The body is where the outside world becomes personal. A cold season is not only a change in temperature, it becomes the feeling of stiff hands, slower walking, shorter patience, and a stronger need to stay near others. A dry season is not only a change in rain, It becomes thirst, longer searches, sharper attention to animal tracks, and a different memory of places where water once remained. A dark season is not only a change in light. It becomes heavier evenings, different sleep, more dependence on fire, and a stronger awareness of sound beyond the resting place. For early humans, these experiences were not separate from the mind. They were part of how the mind learned what the world was. The senses brought the season inward. Skin, hunger, tiredness, smell, and light became information. A person did not need to explain the year to feel that the world had entered another condition. This is why the earliest seasonal knowledge was probably not clean and organized, like a modern chart. It was layered inside memory. One person might remember a place where roots could be dug when other foods became scarce. Another might remember that certain animals crossed open ground after rains. Another might know which shelter held less wind, which slope caught more sun, or which trees gave signs that fruit would soon return. Such knowledge was not just useful information, it shaped attention itself. The mind learned what to look for because the season had made some signs matter more than others. A sound in the branches, a change in the ground, a new insect, a different smell near water, a pattern in clouds, a track in mud or dust. All of these could become meaningful when they were connected to survival across the year. In this slow way, the seasons may have trained early humans to live in more than one layer of time at once. There was the immediate moment, the cold morning, the empty stomach, the path underfoot, but there was also remembered time, the last cold, the last hunger, the last return of warmth, and there was expected time, the thought that what had happened before might come again. This kind of thinking does not require written language or formal science. It requires repeated exposure to change, a memory strong enough to compare, and a social world where useful knowledge can be shared. Human groups did not survive only because individuals noticed things. They survived because noticing could be carried between people, from older adults to younger ones, from skilled foragers to learners, from those who had seen many seasons to those seeing only their first few. A child growing up in such a world would not learn season as a word first. The child would learn it as changes in behavior. People moved differently. They slept in different places. They gathered different foods. They watched the sky or the animals with a different seriousness. The body of the group changed with the body of the land. This is important for the central question of the video, because the human mind was not shaped by seasons in isolation. It was shaped by seasons passing through shared life. Cold could pull people closer. Hunger could make memory more valuable. Returning abundance could strengthen trust in patterns, but also teach caution, because no return was ever perfectly guaranteed. The season was both a teacher and a test. It repeated, but never in exactly the same way. One winter might be milder. One dry period might last longer. One familiar herd might not come. This uncertainty mattered deeply. It meant the mind could not simply memorize a fixed rule. It had to learn flexible expectation. It had to hold the past without being trapped by it. It had to prepare for return while remaining awake to change. That is a very human kind of thinking. Even today, long after calendars and clocks have divided time into neat pieces, human beings still feel changes in light, weather, warmth, and darkness in ways that touch mood, energy, memory, and routine. The modern mind is not the ancient mind. Before the seasons could shape human planning, they shaped something quieter and more constant, the daily movement between waking and sleeping. Light was one of the first clocks the body ever knew. It did not need numbers. It did not need names for the months. It entered through the eyes, touched the nervous system, and helped set the rhythm of alertness, rest, hunger, and movement. For early humans, this rhythm was never separate from the changing year. A long, bright day gave more time to travel, gather, hunt, repair tools, watch children, and read the land. A long, dark night asked the body to slow down, stay close to warmth, listen more carefully, and depend more heavily on memory and group safety. In this way, Seasonal light did not merely show the world, it changed how much of the world could be used. A valley in long daylight was not the same valley under early darkness. A path that felt possible in one part of the year could become risky in another, not because the stones had changed, but because the human body had less light, less certainty, and less time to correct a mistake. This is one of the simplest ways the seasons began to shape the mind, by changing the amount of attention available to the day. Modern science shows that human sleep and wakefulness are strongly influenced by light, especially by the cycle of day and night. It would be false to say we know exactly how every ancient group slept in every place, because human communities lived in many environments and used fire, shelters, social watching, and local habits in different ways. But it is reasonable to say that changing daylight mattered. When daylight shortened, the useful day became more compressed. Tasks that could be spread out under long light had to be chosen more carefully. People had to decide what mattered most before darkness came. Food, water, firewood, safe ground, children, elders, tools, and return paths all became part of a daily calculation. The season did not need to speak. It simply narrowed the window in which the body could act. That narrowing could train attention. A person who knew that dusk would come early might begin to notice distance differently. A far slope might no longer seem worth crossing. A stream might need to be reached sooner. A resting place might be chosen earlier, before the light fell too low to read tracks, broken branches, mud, or danger signs. When light changed, the mind had to change its estimate of time. Not time as a number, but time as remaining possibility. How much can still be done before the day closes? How far can the group go before the dark makes movement slower? How much wood is enough for the night? These questions belong directly to the origin of seasonal thinking, because they show how the turning year could enter the mind through ordinary decisions. Longer darkness may also have changed the emotional shape of the day. Darkness is not automatically fear, and we should not turn early life into a dramatic story. Many human groups would have known night very well. They may have used firelight, moonlight, familiar shelters, social closeness, and experience to make darkness livable. Still, darkness reduces visual information. It makes sound more important. It changes the body's sense of space. In a long night, attention may become more inward and more listening-based. People may speak more softly, move less, stay nearer to warmth, and let the mind rest inside a smaller circle of known things. In seasons of longer light, the mind may open outward again, following distant signs, wider paths, and longer movement. This back and forth between expansion and contraction was not just environmental, it could become mental. The year taught the mind that there were times to reach farther and times to gather in. It taught that alertness itself had seasons. The body could not remain equally active in every part of the year, because light, temperature, and food did not offer the same conditions. So attention had to become adjustable. This may seem simple, but it is deeply important. A mind that adjusts When daylight changed across the year, it did more than lengthen or shorten activity. It changed the shape of rest. A long night was not simply an empty space after the day ended. It was a different condition of life. For early humans living without artificial lighting, darkness would have reduced movement, narrowed vision, and increased the importance of fire, sound, touch, and social nearness. Sleep may not always have been one long, uninterrupted block. Studies of some traditional and small-scale societies, along with historical evidence from later periods, suggest that human sleep can be flexible, shaped by light exposure, temperature, work, safety, culture, and social habits. We should be careful here. We cannot claim that all early humans slept in one exact pattern. But we can say that seasonal light created pressures that likely affected when people rested, how long they remained quiet, and how they divided attention through the night. In colder or darker parts of the year, a group might settle earlier, stay nearer to fire, and let the day close into a longer period of reduced movement. That did not mean the mind was simply turned off. Night has its own kind of awareness. Someone may wake to feed a fire, someone may listen to wind, animals, crying children, or the breathing of others nearby. Someone may remember the path to be taken when light returns. In this sense, sleep and attention were not enemies. They shared the night. The seasons stretched or compressed the boundary between them. This matters because the human mind is strongly shaped by cycles of rest and wakefulness. Memory, emotion, learning, and bodily repair are all connected to sleep. Early humans did not need to know this scientifically for it to be true in their lives. If long darkness encouraged longer periods of stillness, if cold encouraged people to remain close, if reduced travel gave the body more hours near a shelter, then seasonal conditions may have changed the mind's nightly rhythm. A person who spent many evenings in darkness might experience more time for memory, story, listening, or quiet mental rehearsal. A person living under long summer light might spend more hours moving, gathering, watching, and responding to the outer world. The same mind could be drawn inward or outward, depending partly on the season. This does not mean winter created thought or summer created action. Real life was more complex than that, but the seasonal balance of light and dark could repeatedly tilt attention in different directions. The shorter day may have made choices feel more urgent. The longer night may have made waiting more familiar. The returning light may have changed mood, energy, and confidence. These are not dramatic claims. They are grounded in a simple fact. Humans are biological beings, and light is one of the strongest signals by which biological beings organize daily life. For people living close to natural light, the year did not pass only outside the body. It passed through sleep pressure, waking time, alertness, and the felt length of a day. Imagine a group in a cold season, not as a scene of panic, but as a slow adjustment. The sun leaves early. Work must end sooner. Fire becomes central. Tools are repaired close to warmth. Children sleep near adults. Older people carry knowledge of where the next shelter may be found. Voices lower as darkness fills the space beyond the firelight. The mind is not idle. It is sorting the day, holding fears gently, remembering roots, perhaps listening to older stories about earlier cold seasons. Now imagine the same land under longer light. The group can move later. Children see farther. Tracks remain readable for more hours. Water, plants, and animals can be searched for across a wider area. Attention stretches outward. The mind follows distance. These changes are directly connected to the video's central question because they show that seasons may have shaped not only what early humans did, but how consciousness itself felt through the year. Some parts of the year may have encouraged compression. Clat. Light does something unusual to the mind. It does not only reveal objects, it gives the day a feeling of size. Under long daylight, the world can feel wider because there is more time to cross it, more time to look carefully, more time to make mistakes and correct them before darkness arrives. Under short daylight, the same world can feel smaller. A familiar path may seem longer. A hill may feel less inviting. A distant stand of trees may no longer belong to today, but to some other day when the sun will remain higher for longer. For early humans, this changing size of the day may have been one of the first ways the seasons shaped judgment. The mind had to measure possibility without clocks. It had to ask, silently and repeatedly, what can still be done while light remains? That question is simple, but it lies close to the roots of planning. If the day is long, a group may search farther for food, follow tracks longer, gather more wood, visit a known water source, or explore a route that would be unwise in shorter light. If the day is brief, the mind may become more selective. It may choose the nearer patch of plants, the safer crossing, the shelter already known, the task that can be finished before vision fades. In this way, changing light did not just affect mood, it affected priorities. It taught people that time was not the same every day, even before time was counted. A day could be generous or narrow. The season decided part of that generosity. This is directly tied to the question of how seasons shape the human mind, because judgment grows from repeated limits. When early humans adjusted action to light, they were also practicing a kind of mental comparison. Today's daylight is not like the daylight before. This path is possible now, but may not be possible later. This work must be done early, because darkness will arrive sooner. Such comparisons could strengthen the ability to think beyond immediate desire. The body might want to continue searching, but the mind remembers the coming dark. The group might see signs of food farther away, but the season teaches restraint. A shorter day can teach the mind to stop before danger rises. A longer day can teach it to use opportunity while it lasts. Neither lesson is dramatic. Both are powerful. Human life depended not only on strength or courage, but on timing. Seasonal light gave timing a physical form. It turned the sky into a limit everyone could see. It also helped create shared rhythm inside the group. When light faded, movement slowed for all. When dawn came early, possibilities opened for all. This shared experience may have mattered socially. A group that moved together had to feel the day together. People had to sense when to leave, when to return, when to gather near fire, when to keep walking. The season shaped not only individual attention, but group coordination. Even without formal words for hours, people could organize around the visible decline of light, the cooling of air, the length of shadows, and the memory of how quickly darkness had come in recent days. Repeated across many seasons, this would make time a shared experience before it became an abstract one. The mind did not learn time alone. It learned time with others, under the same sky. There is also a quieter emotional layer here. Light can make waiting feel different. During long dark periods, the return of dawn may carry more than brightness. It may bring relief, movement, warmth, and renewed confidence in the world. During long, bright periods, the evening may feel less urgent, allowing more activity and perhaps more social time before rest. The seasons therefore shaped not only how much people could do, but how the day was felt from inside. A short winter day might carry a sense of compression. A long summer evening might carry extension. These feelings could become part of memory. Later, when signs of shortening light returned, the body might begin preparing emotionally before hardship fully arrived. This does not require any mystical idea. It is the ordinary biology of a creature that hunger may have been one of the oldest teachers of memory. It is easy, from a modern distance, to imagine the seasons as changes in scenery. Snow, rain, fruit, dry grass, bright skies, bare branches. But for early humans, the season was often felt first as a change in what could be eaten. A place that had seemed generous in one part of the year could become almost silent in another. Fruits ripened and disappeared. Nuts or seeds became available only for a time. Roots might be easier to find in some conditions than others. Animals moved, bred, gathered, scattered, or became harder to track. Rivers and coasts changed what they offered. Hunger turned these changes into memory because the body could not afford to forget them. A person who remembered where a certain plant returned after rain, where animals passed during colder weeks, or where water remained in a dry period held more than a useful detail. That person held a piece of seasonal time. Before people marked the year with symbols, they could mark it through the return and absence of food. This is directly connected to how the seasons began to shape the human mind, because food teaches the difference between now and not yet. If something is not available today, the mind must ask whether it may return later. If something appears suddenly, the mind must ask how long it will last. If a place is empty, memory must decide whether it is truly empty or only waiting for the right season. In hunting and gathering life, knowledge of foods is not random. It depends on close attention to local landscapes, weather, plant cycles, animal behavior, and the experience of older people. We should be careful not to make early humans sound like perfect masters of nature. They faced uncertainty, failed searches, changing climates, and local differences. But they also lived with deep practical knowledge built through repeated observation. A patch of berries, a stand of trees, a shellfish bed, a migration path, a nesting area, a hidden water source, a place where tubers could be dug. Each could become part of a mental map that changed with the year. This kind of map is not only a map of space, it is a map of return. The mind had to remember not just where something was, but when it had been there before. That small difference is enormous. A simple place memory says, food was here. A seasonal memory says, food was here after the rains, or when the air warmed, or when certain animals moved through, or when other foods were gone. This made memory more layered. It tied location to timing, sensation, and expectation. Hunger sharpened the lesson because the cost of poor memory could be real. If a group arrived too early, food might not yet be ready. If it arrived too late, animals, insects, weather, or other groups may have already changed the opportunity. If it forgot a fallback place during a difficult season, the body would pay for that forgetting. This does not mean every decision was calculated. In a modern way, much of it may have been habit, shared practice, root knowledge, and learning by following those who had lived through more seasons. But habit itself is a form of remembered time. A group returns because return has mattered before. A child learns that certain signs lead adults to change direction. A younger hunter learns that tracks mean different things depending on dryness, mud, cold, or new growth. A gatherer learns that a familiar plant must be known not only by its shape, but by its moment. Slowly, the mind becomes sensitive to the season behind the object. Food is no longer only food. It becomes a sign of where the year has carried the world. This may be one of the quiet beginnings of future-oriented thought. Hunger belongs to the present, but seasonal food memory reaches beyond the present. It remembers absence, waits for return, and prepares for shortage. It teaches that the world can be empty now and full later, generous now and difficult later. That rhythm would have shaped emotion as well as thought. A returning food could bring relief because it proved that memory had be. A seasonal memory is different from an ordinary memory because it must hold absence without treating absence as the end. This may sound simple, but for early humans it mattered deeply. If a tree had no fruit today, that did not always mean the place had lost its value. If a valley held no herd today, that did not always mean the animals would never return. If a riverbank seemed empty, it might still belong to a future moment when water, fish, plants, or animals came back into reach. The mind had to learn that the present was not the whole truth of a place. A landscape could be sleeping, waiting, drying, freezing, opening, or preparing in ways that only repeated experience could reveal. Hunger made this lesson serious. A hungry body wants an answer now, but seasonal life often gives an answer later. So the mind had to remember places that were temporarily useless. It had to keep them alive inside thought, even when the eyes saw nothing there. This is one of the quiet ways the seasons may have shaped human intelligence. They trained memory to include delay. A useful place was not only a place that helped today, it might be a place that would help when rains returned, when cold passed, when animals moved again, or when certain plants reached the right stage. In that sense, the early human mind had to live among invisible possibilities. Not fantasy, not imagination without evidence, but possibilities learned from repeated return. This kind of memory was probably carried through movement. People remembered by walking, by following paths, by touching certain stones, crossing certain streams, watching slopes, smelling wet soil, noticing wind, and learning from the behavior of other people. The land itself became a memory system. A bend in a river could remind someone of a season of fish. A grove could remind someone of ripening fruit. A dry hollow could remind someone of water that remained there when other places failed. A hillside could remind someone of animals seen there in a colder time. Such memory was not stored like a written list. It was woven into roots, bodies, gestures, and shared habits. Older people may have been especially important in this world, not because every elder always knew best, but because long life could mean more stored seasons. Someone who had survived many cycles might remember a rare shortage, an unusual freeze, a late return of animals, or a hidden food used when easier foods disappeared. In a seasonal world, experience could become protection. The young might have strength, speed, and curiosity, but the old could carry time. This matters for the central question, because the seasons did not only shape individual memory, they shaped the social value of memory. A group needed people who could remember beyond the present mood of the land. When the world looked empty, memory could say, "Not yet." When the world looked generous, memory could say, "This will not last." Both kinds of knowledge are important. One protects hope from disappearing too quickly. The other protects comfort from becoming careless. Seasonal hunger therefore taught a balanced kind of thinking. It encouraged confidence in return, but also respect for uncertainty. No season was perfectly identical to the one before it. A fruiting place might fail, a herd might shift its route, a drought might last longer, a storm might change a river. Because of this, memory could not be rigid. The mind had to compare, adjust, and revise. It had to ask whether this year was following the old pattern or quietly becoming different. That flexible comparison is close to the heart of human thought. The mind was not only storing facts, it was testing the present against remembered cycles. Food made the test unavoidable. If the expected plant had not appeared, people had to notice. If animals arrived earlier, later, or in smaller numbers, people had to adapt. If a known place no longer gave what it once gave, memory had to change without losing the larger pattern of return. In this way, hunger and season worked together to train attention toward both reliable. To remember food across seasons is also to remember loss. This is a quiet truth, but it matters. Early humans did not learn return only from abundance. They learned it from disappearance. A plant that fed the group for a short time could vanish from the diet for many months. A herd that filled a valley with movement could leave behind silence. A river that seemed alive in one season could shrink, freeze, flood, or change its edges until it no longer offered the same food. Each disappearance asked the mind to do something difficult, to not forget simply because the object was gone. This is very different from reacting only to what is present. A mind shaped by seasonal hunger must keep a relationship with things it cannot currently see. It must carry the memory of fruit through months without fruit, the memory of water through dry distance, the memory of animals through empty land. That ability may have given early humans a deeper sense of time, because absence itself became meaningful. The missing food was not nothing. It was a sign of where the year stood. It could mean the group had arrived too late, too early, or at the edge of a harder season. It could mean movement was needed. It could mean waiting was wiser. It could mean asking older memory for another path. In this way, hunger taught the mind that emptiness had information inside it. A bare branch, a silent nesting place, a dry bank, a valley without tracks. These were not just failures. They were messages. If the mind knew how to compare them with what had happened before, this comparison would have been learned slowly, through shared life. Children would see adults react to absence in different ways. Sometimes, an empty place would be abandoned. Sometimes it would be remembered for later. Sometimes it would lead to a change of route. Sometimes it would be discussed, perhaps through gesture, speech, or story, as part of a larger pattern. We cannot know the exact words early humans used in deep prehistory, but we can be confident that social learning mattered. Human beings are not solitary memory machines. They inherit attention from others. A child learns what is worth noticing because adults notice it. A young person learns that a fruiting tree matters not only when it is full, but also when it is bare, because its bareness may mark a point in the cycle. The group teaches the mind which absences are ordinary, which are worrying, and which may be temporary. This is directly connected to the way seasons shaped the human mind. They trained people to see the present as one frame in a longer movement. A place could be remembered as generous, even when it was currently empty. A hunger could be endured differently if the group knew a return was likely. A shortage could feel more dangerous if expected signs failed to appear. Emotional life became tied to seasonal memory. Relief, worry, patience, disappointment, and hope were not floating feelings. They were attached to what the land had done before and what it might do again. This is why food memory may have been one of the earliest bridges between survival and meaning. When a group returned to a place and found food again, the landscape became trustworthy in a limited but powerful way. Not perfectly trustworthy, never guaranteed, but patterned. When the expected return did not happen, the mind learned another lesson. Even patterns can break. That lesson may have encouraged caution, flexibility, and humility before the world. The seasons did not create a simple mind that believed everything would repeat exactly. They created pressure for a mind that could remember repetition while staying alert to difference. The human sense of time may have grown from that pressure, not from counting days at first, but from carrying absences, watching returns, and measuring the present against remembered hunger. In a seasonal world, memory was not decoration. It was part of survival. It told people where to go, when to leave, when to wait, what to trust, and what to question. It also gave early humans a quiet way to understand life. Movement was not only a way for early humans to reach food, it was a way of thinking with the whole body. In a seasonal world, staying in one place was not always possible, and moving was not always simple. The land changed its invitations. A valley that offered plants, animals, water, and shelter in one season might become too cold, too dry, too flooded, or too empty in another. A river could become a path, a barrier, or a source of food depending on the time of year. Open grassland could be useful when animals passed through, but harsh when heat or wind made travel costly. A forest edge could offer fruit, wood, shade, and small animals, but only if people knew when its gifts were likely to appear. For early humans, movement had to follow more than desire. It had to follow signs. This is where seasonal movement became mental work. To move well, a group had to remember where it had been, notice what was changing now, and imagine what conditions might be like ahead. A path was not just a line across the ground. It was a chain of decisions shaped by weather, light, hunger, water, animal movement, children, elders, tools, and the need to return safely. The mind learned through walking because every journey tested memory against the living world. If people moved too late, they might meet cold, shortage, or flooded ground. If they moved too early, the food they hoped for might not yet be ready. If they moved too far, the weak could suffer. If they stayed too long, a familiar place could stop supporting them. In this way, the seasons taught that survival was not only about knowing places, but about knowing when a place belonged to the group's life. This idea is important for the central question of the video. The human mind may have been shaped by seasons, not simply because people watched them, but because people had to move through them. A changing year made the mind compare routes. It made distance emotional. A far place might mean hope if it held remembered food, but danger if the season was turning against travel. A nearby shelter might mean safety, but also hunger if the land around it had become empty. Movement forced early humans to balance risk and possibility. This balancing is a form of thought. It does not need writing. It does not need a map drawn on skin or stone. It can live in memory, habit, gesture, spoken warning, and the quiet confidence of someone who has walked the same route in more than one season. We should not imagine all early humans moving in the same way. Some groups may have ranged widely. Others may have stayed within smaller territories rich in resources. Coasts, rivers, forests, grasslands, mountains, and cold regions all shaped movement differently. Climate also changed across deep time, and human groups adapted in many ways. But across many environments, one principle remained: the world was not equally useful all year. Seasonal change meant that movement often had timing inside it. A group might follow migrating animals, move toward water, return to known plant foods, seek shelter from cold, or shift camp, because insects, floods, storms, or heat made a place harder to live in. Each movement carried a memory of previous seasons and a question about the one now unfolding. That question was never fully safe. The herd might not be where it was before. The water might have dried sooner. Another group might already be near the best place. A child might be too tired to continue. Weather might change. This uncertainty made movement more than routine. It trained flexible attention. The mind had to hold the old route lightly enough to change it. It had to trust memory, but also read the present. This may be one of the deepest lessons seasons gave to human thought. The past is a guide, not a guarantee. To move through seasonal landscapes was to learn that intelligence is not stillness. It is adjustment. It is the ability to pause at a ridge, feel the wind, look at the sky, remember last year's hunger, listen to others, and choose a direction without knowing everything. Long before roads and calendar, a seasonal path is never only a path through space, it is a path through memory. For early humans, moving from one place to another did not mean crossing an empty landscape. It meant passing through places that carried earlier experiences, a hollow where water had once remained, a ridge where wind became too strong, a river bend where animals had crossed, a patch of trees that had given food in a warmer time, a shelter that had held the group through cold rain. Each place could hold more than one meaning, because each place could change with the season. A river that was easy to cross in one month might become dangerous in another. A dry plain that allowed fast walking in one period might become exposed and exhausting in heat. A wooded slope that seemed quiet during cold might become full of insects, birds, fruit, and animal movement later. The mind had to remember these shifting identities. It had to know that a place was not one thing forever. This may have trained early humans to think in relationships instead of fixed categories. A place was useful because of water, but only when water remained. A shelter was safe because of wind protection, but only if food could still be found nearby. A valley was generous because animals passed through, but only if the group arrived at the right time. Movement made these relationships visible. The body walked through them, and the mind learned to connect them. This is directly tied to how the seasons shaped the human mind, because seasonal movement required a kind of layered intelligence. It was not enough to remember where. It was necessary to remember when, under what conditions, and with whom. A route that suited strong adults might be too difficult for children or older people. A path that worked in long daylight might be too risky when evenings came early. A camp that was useful when food was nearby might become a poor choice if the group needed to travel farther each day. So the mind had to place human needs inside seasonal conditions. It had to think about bodies, not just geography. How tired is the group? How cold will the night become? Is there enough water ahead? Can the slowest members keep moving? These questions show that movement was also social thought. A group did not move as a single body with one strength. It moved with different ages, different skills, different memories, and different vulnerabilities. The seasons made those differences matter. Cold could make weakness more serious. Heat could make distance heavier. Hunger could make impatience sharper. A wise movement was not always the fastest movement. Sometimes it was the movement that kept the group together long enough to reach the next safe place. This kind of judgment may have strengthened cooperation. People needed shared attention to signs, shared memory of routes, and some way of agreeing when to leave or stay. We cannot know exactly how early groups discussed every decision, but the need itself is clear. Seasonal landscapes reward coordination. If one person remembers a water source, another recognizes animal tracks, another notices dark clouds, and another knows a sheltered resting place. The group's movement becomes a shared mind spread across many people. That shared mind was shaped by the year. It learned that no path was simply good or bad. A path was good now, or not yet, or no longer. This small difference is powerful. It means seasonal movement may have helped early humans develop a more flexible sense of possibility. The same landscape could invite, warn, refuse, or open again. The mind learned to wait for conditions, to change direction when signs changed, and to keep older routes alive even when they were not useful today. In a world without written maps, this was a deep form of knowledge. It was carried in feet, eyes, stories, gestures, pauses, and returns. To follow a seasonal path was to accept that the world was alive. With timing, a place could not be understood by looking at it once. It had to be known across repeated visits, across cold and warmth, wet and dry, abundance and short. Every seasonal movement carried a question that could not be answered with certainty. Should the group stay a little longer, or leave before the land closes? Should it follow animals that may lead to food, or remain near a shelter that is already known? Should it cross before rain, before flood, before cold, before the light becomes too short? These were not abstract questions about travel. They were questions about the future entering the present. The season made tomorrow matter today. That may be one of the reasons movement became such a powerful teacher of the mind. To move through a changing year, early humans had to act before all evidence was complete. If they waited until food was fully gone, they might be too weak to travel well. If they left too soon, they might abandon resources that could have sustained them longer. If they followed old memory too rigidly, they might miss new signs. If they trusted only the present, they might fail to prepare for what usually came next. Seasonal movement therefore required a delicate balance between memory and anticipation. It taught the mind to live in uncertainty without becoming helpless. This is directly connected to the origin of seasonal thought. The seasons did not give early humans perfect predictions. They gave repeated pressures. Warmth often returned, but not on a human command. Animals often followed patterns, but not like objects on a fixed path. Rain might come, fail, arrive early, arrive late, or transform the ground in unexpected ways. A mind shaped by this world could not depend on exact certainty. It had to work with likelihood. This may sound modern, but the experience is ancient. A group moving across a landscape had to sense whether a sign was strong enough to guide action. Fresh tracks, changing winds, swelling clouds, fewer fruits, colder mornings, shorter light, drying pools. Each sign might influence movement, but none alone guaranteed the future. The mind had to weigh them together. That weighing is a form of intelligence grown from season. It is not a calculation written in numbers. It is a felt comparison built from memory, sensation, and shared experience. Movement also made the future visible in the body. The farther a group traveled, the more energy it spent before reaching what it hoped to find. The weaker the group became, the more costly each wrong decision grew. Children might need carrying. Older people might need slower pacing. Injured people might change the route. Tools, fire-making materials, food, and sleeping places all had to be considered together. A seasonal journey was therefore not only a search for resources, it was an act of care. The mind had to think ahead because bodies were vulnerable. This vulnerability may have deepened human social thought. Moving at the right time was not only about finding abundance, it was about not losing people on the way. The season forced early humans to ask what kind of movement the whole group could survive. That question could shape values as well as decisions. It could make patience useful, caution respected, memory honored, and cooperation necessary. Over generations, such movements may have helped build a mental world in which places were connected by expectation. A camp was not just a camp, it was a starting point. A river was not just water, it was a crossing remembered in relation to rain. A distant ridge was not just stone and sky. It was a sign that beyond it, in a certain part of the year, another possibility might open. The mind learned to stretch across space because the season required it to stretch across time. This is why seasonal movement belongs so deeply to the story of how the human mind was shaped. It trained people to think in routes, returns, delays, warnings, and openings. It taught that a good decision is not always the one that satisfies the present moment. Sometimes the wise decision is to leave while there is still food, rest before the body collapses, turn back before darkness, or wait because the sign is not yet strong enough. These are quiet forms of judgment, but waiting is one of the quietest skills a mind can learn, and the seasons may have been among its oldest teachers. For early humans, waiting was not the same as doing nothing. It could be active, watchful, uncomfortable, and full of meaning. A group might wait for cold to loosen its hold on the land, for rain to soften the ground, for fruit to ripen, for animals to return, for a river to fall after flooding. or for daylight to become long enough to travel farther. In a seasonal world, many important things could not be forced. Hunger could push the body to search, but it could not make a plant ripen. Cold could make people long for warmth, but it could not hurry the sun higher in the year. Memory could tell the mind that certain changes had returned before, but it could not guarantee the exact day of return. This made waiting a serious mental act. The mind had to endure the space between need and fulfillment. It had to keep attention alive when the answer had not arrived yet. This is directly connected to how the seasons shaped human thought, because seasonal life taught that not every problem could be solved by immediate action. Sometimes action mattered: moving camp, gathering wood, following tracks, repairing tools, sharing food, protecting children, staying close to fire. But sometimes survival also depended on restraint. Do not eat everything too quickly. Do not leave too late. Do not cross when the water is still high. Do not trust warmth too soon if cold may return. Do not forget a place, simply because it is empty now. Waiting required the mind to hold desire and caution at the same time. That balance may have deepened patience, not as a moral idea, but as a practical response to a world that changed in rhythms. A person living close to the seasons would learn that some forms of relief arrive slowly. The first warmer morning might not mean the hard time is over. The first rain might not mean food is ready. The first sign of an animal trail might not mean the herd is near enough to follow safely. Seasonal waiting trained people to read beginnings carefully. A beginning was not yet a promise. It was a sign that needed comparison with memory. This may be one of the subtle ways the human mind learned to think in stages. The world did not move from empty to full in one moment. It shifted. Buds came before fruit. Tracks came before animals. Clouds came before rain. Thaw came before easy travel. The mind that noticed these stages could wait with more understanding. It could prepare before abundance arrived, and conserve strength before hardship ended. Waiting also changed emotion. A hungry wait is different from a safe wait. A cold wait is different from a hopeful one. If a group remembered that warmth usually returned, waiting might carry endurance. If expected signs failed, waiting might become worry. If older people remembered an earlier season when food came late, their memory could steady the group. If no one remembered such a delay, uncertainty might grow heavier. In this way, waiting was not private. It belonged to the group. People waited together, and the way they waited may have depended on shared memory, trust, and the ability to keep fear from breaking cooperation too soon. We should not romanticize this. Seasonal waiting could be hard. It could mean hunger, discomfort, shorter tempers, weaker bodies, and difficult choices. But the difficulty is exactly why it mattered. A mind that waits across seasons learns that the present feeling is not always the final truth. Cold feels complete while it is happening, but the body may remember warmth. Hunger feels urgent, but the mind may remember return. Darkness feels long, but dawn still comes, and later in the year it may come earlier. These repeated experiences could slowly shape a deeper human sense of time, the ability to live inside a condition while knowing it may change. That ability is still part of human life. People wait for healing, for grief to soften, for work to bear fruit, for children to grow, for difficult times to pass. Modern waiting is not the same. The mind that learns to wait also learns to protect itself from false certainty. This was important in a seasonal world because the year repeated, but never perfectly. A warmer wind might suggest change, but cold could still return. A few early plants might appear, but hunger might not be over. A herd might be seen at a distance, but it might pass too far away to help. A river might begin to fall, but still remain dangerous. For early humans, waiting was therefore not only about patience, it was about careful judgment. The mind had to ask whether a sign was strong enough to trust. It had to decide when to act and when to hold back. This is one of the quiet ways seasons may have shaped human thought. They made the future visible in pieces, never all at once. A person could see hints of what might come, but had to live with uncertainty until the pattern became clearer. That uncertainty may have trained a kind of mental steadiness. If people reacted too quickly to every sign, they could waste energy, leave too early, cross unsafe ground, or abandon a place that still had value. If they waited too long, they could miss the moment when movement, gathering, or preparation mattered most. The season taught that timing was not only about knowing what would happen, it was about sensing when enough had changed. This kind of thinking belongs directly to the question of how seasons shaped the human mind, because it shows that the year did not simply give information. It demanded interpretation. A cold morning, a wet smell in the soil, birds moving differently, fewer tracks near water, longer light at evening, swelling buds, thinning snow, a different insect sound. Any one of these signs might matter, but none alone could carry the whole truth. The mind had to compare signs with memory. It had to listen to older knowledge and present sensation at the same time. It had to remain open, but not careless. Waiting, in this sense, became a form of intelligence. It allowed the mind to gather evidence before action. It also gave people time to prepare quietly. While waiting for a return of food, a group might repair tools, teach younger members, tend fire, adjust shelters, sort what remained, watch animal movement, or decide which route would be taken if conditions worsened. Waiting could hold work inside it. It could be filled with small actions that made future movement easier. This may be why seasonal waiting is so different from emptiness. It is a slow bridge between the present and the future. It asks people to live now in a way that respects what may come later. Emotionally, this would not have been easy. A hungry person does not wait calmly simply because memory says food may return. A cold body does not become comfortable because warmth is expected. The body still suffers, but the mind can frame suffering differently when it knows the world has rhythms. If hardship is understood as part of a season, it may feel less like total abandonment and more like a difficult passage. This does not remove fear. It gives fear a shape. It gives hope a place to rest. And when hope is tied to careful memory rather than fantasy, it can become useful. The seasons may have taught early humans this kind of grounded hope. Not the certainty that everything would be fine, but the knowledge that conditions change, signs matter, and preparation can meet return when it comes. Over many generations, such waiting could shape the human relationship with time itself. The present became something to endure, read, and use. The future became something partly hidden, partly suggested. The past became a guide, but not a command. A mind living this way would not only react to hunger, cold, darkness, or absence. It would begin to hold them inside a wider pattern. It would learn that some things must not be rushed, and some moments must not be missed. This may be one of the oldest forms of wisdom the seasons gave. Patience without passivity, hope without certainty, action without panic. Long before written calendars told people how many days remained until a season chang, waiting also taught early humans that the mind could travel before the body moved. This is a quiet but important point. When a group waited for a season to turn, people were not only sitting inside the present, they were often mentally moving toward a place, a food, a path, or a condition that had not yet arrived. They might remember the slope where plants had returned after earlier rains. They might think of the river crossing that would become easier when water lowered. They might imagine the open ground where animals had passed in a warmer time. This was not fantasy in the loose sense. It was expectation built from lived experience. The body remained where it was, but the mind reached ahead. In a seasonal world, this reaching ahead could be a survival skill. It allowed people to prepare tools before travel, conserve strength before movement, watch signs before making a decision, and keep a remembered future alive during a difficult present. This is directly tied to how seasons shaped the human mind, because waiting stretched thought beyond immediate need. Hunger says now. Cold says now. Darkness says now. But season says not yet, soon, later, returning, passing. To live with seasons was to live with these delayed meanings. The mind had to hold them without turning them into certainty. A remembered food might return, but perhaps not enough. A known path might open, but perhaps later than before. A warm period might begin, but perhaps with storms or floods. Waiting, therefore, trained a careful form of imagination, one that looked forward while remaining answerable to the land. This kind of imagination may have been essential for planning, but it was also essential for emotional survival. During a hard season, the mind needed some way to remain connected to change. If every cold night felt like the whole truth, despair would be stronger. If every empty place meant permanent loss, memory would have little power. But if the mind could remember that the world had changed before, then waiting could carry a small inner movement toward return. This was not a guarantee. It was a way of staying oriented. The seasons may have given early humans a repeated lesson in temporary states. Cold was real, but not always final. Hunger was real, but not always permanent. Darkness was real, but not endless. At the same time, abundance was also temporary. Warmth could pass. Food could vanish. A generous place could close. So the mind learned not only to survive hardship, but also not to become careless during ease. This double lesson is one of the deepest gifts of seasonal life. It teaches that no condition should be mistaken for the whole of life. A difficult time may change, and a good time must be used wisely. For early humans, this would not have been a comforting phrase. It would have been a practical truth repeated in weather, light, food, and movement. Waiting made that truth personal. It put the body inside delay and asked the mind to remain responsive. It also strengthened the importance of shared memory. A person waiting alone can doubt what they remember. A group waiting together can steady one another, especially when older members carry memories of many returns and many failures. They might know that a plant often comes late after certain rains, or that a cold period can break suddenly, or that a familiar animal route sometimes shifts before returning. Such knowledge could turn waiting into a shared discipline. The young learn not only what to do, but how long to keep watching before acting. They learned that patience was not weakness when it was guided by attention. They learned that rushing could be as dangerous as delay. In this way, the seasons shaped not only memory and planning, but the inner tempo of human life. They taught the mind to move slowly when the world required slowness, to act quickly when the moment opened, and to sense the difference between the two. Even today, this lesson remains recognizable. Much of human life still depends on timing that cannot be forced. Healing, trust, learning, aging, grief, and hope. Fear did not feel the same in every season. For early humans, danger was not only a sudden animal, a storm, or an unfamiliar sound in darkness. Danger changed its shape with the year. A cold season could make the same distance harder to cross. A dry season could turn a known water place into a question. A season of scarce food could make every decision feel heavier because the body had fewer reserves. Longer nights could make the circle of vision smaller and increase dependence on fire, listening, and closeness. This does not mean early humans lived in constant terror. That would be too simple, and probably untrue. Human beings are skilled at making ordinary life inside difficult conditions. They adapt, learn, joke, rest, care for children, and build familiarity even in landscapes that carry risk. But seasonal change may have taught the mind that fear has timing. Some dangers became more likely when food was scarce, when travel was harder, when weather reduced visibility, or when cold made weakness more serious. In this way, the seasons shaped fear by giving it patterns. A sound in the dark might be frightening at any time, but a sound in a long cold period, when the group was tired and hungry, could press differently on the mind. A river crossing might always require care, but after heavy rain or melting snow, it became a different kind of decision. A familiar trail might be safe under long daylight, but less safe when darkness arrived early. The mind had to learn that fear was not only about the object in front of it. It was about the conditions surrounding that object. This is directly connected to how the seasons began to shape the human mind. Seasonal fear taught context. It taught that the same place, the same sound, the same animal track, the same cloud, or the same empty food patch could mean different things depending on the time of year. A dry wind might mean discomfort in one season, but danger in another if water was already low. Cold rain might be inconvenient for a strong adult, but serious for a child, an older person, or someone already hungry. A missing herd might mean little when other foods were abundant, but much more when the group had few alternatives. The mind shaped by seasons had to ask not only, "What is this?" but "What does this mean now?" That question may be one of the roots of careful human judgment. Fear, when shaped by season, could become more than panic. It could become attention. It could pull the mind toward preparation. Gather more wood, stay closer to shelter, move before the storm, share warmth, avoid a crossing, remember another path, listen to those who had seen this season before. Of course, fear could also mislead. A hungry mind might become impatient. A cold body might make risk feel larger or smaller than it really was. A group under pressure might leave too early or wait too long. But even this uncertainty trained the mind. It forced people to compare feeling with evidence. Is this fear warning us? Or is it the body's exhaustion speaking? Is the land truly closing? Or have we endured this kind of cold before? Are the animals gone? Or have they only shifted? Seasonal fear was therefore a teacher, because it asked the mind to interpret emotion inside the turning year. It did not remove danger. It gave danger a rhythm. A harsh season could make people more watchful, more dependent on one another, and more respectful of limits. A gentler season could loosen the body and widen movement, but it could also tempt people to forget that hardship returns. Fear in this older world was not something separate from memory. It was tied to remembered winters, remembered droughts, remembered floods, remembered empty places, and remembered recoveries. The season taught that fear could arrive before the danger was fully visible, because signs often came first. Shorter light, colder mornings, fewer tracks, thinner bodies, dry ground, restless animals. These could awaken concern before crisis. That early concern may have helped the human mind prepare, and perhaps this is one reason fear. Seasonal fear also changed because the body's margin of safety changed. A well-fed body in mild weather can meet difficulty with more strength. A tired body in cold, hunger, or long darkness meets the same difficulty differently. For early humans, this meant danger was never measured only by the thing itself. It was measured by the condition of the people facing it. A storm was more serious if the group was already cold. A long walk was harder if food had been scarce for many days. A small injury mattered more when travel, shelter, and warmth were uncertain. A night sound could feel heavier when everyone was exhausted, and the fire needed care. This is not because ancient people were weak or constantly frightened. It is because the seasons changed the resources of the body. Energy, warmth, daylight, water, and food all shaped how much risk a person or group could carry. The mind had to learn this. It had to understand that courage is not the same in every condition. A wise group might avoid a crossing not because it lacked bravery, but because the season had made the cost of a mistake too high. A hunter might stop following tracks not because the trail was meaningless, but because darkness or cold was closing the day. A family might stay near shelter not because the wider land had become unknown, but because the body could not spend energy carelessly. In this way, seasonal fear taught the mind to respect limits. It connected emotion to calculation, not in a modern mathematical sense, but in a lived and bodily sense. How much strength remains? How far is safety? How cold will the night become? Who is most vulnerable now? These questions gave fear a social shape. Fear was not only inside one person. It moved through the group. A child's weakness, an elder's slower pace, a mother's concern, a skilled tracker's warning, or an older person's memory of a difficult season could all change what the group decided. The season made vulnerability visible. In a warm and abundant time, differences inside the group might be easier to carry. In a cold or hungry time, those same differences could become central to survival. This matters for the central question because it shows that seasons may have shaped the human mind by linking fear with care. The mind did not only ask, "Am I safe?" It had to ask, "Are we safe enough to continue?" That question may have strengthened attention to others. A group that survived seasonal hardship needed to notice tiredness, hunger, cold, and fear in more than one body. It needed shared warmth, shared memory, shared warning, and sometimes shared restraint. Fear, under seasonal pressure, could become a signal that pulled people closer together. Long nights might make fire and nearness more important. Cold weather might make cooperation around shelter and clothing more important. Scarcity might make memory of alternative foods more important. The danger was real, but the response was not only panic. It was organization. It was choosing where to sleep, when to move, how to divide effort, and who needed protection. We should be careful not to claim that seasons alone created human cooperation. Cooperation has deep roots in primate social life and human evolution. But seasonal hardship may have given cooperation repeated tests. It asked whether a group could remain steady when bodies were strained and emotions sharpened. It asked whether fear could be used as information without breaking trust. This is a very old human challenge. Fear can warn, but it can also spread too quickly. It can make a group alert, or it can make a group careless. Seasonal living may have trained early humans to distinguish between fear that points toward preparation and fear that only exhausts the mind. When cold returned year after year, when food sometimes vanished and returned, when darkness lengthened and then slowly shortened again, fear itself became part of a pattern. It was not meaningless. It belonged to moments when the world was asking for more caution. And because those moments passed, fear also learned. Fear became more complex when the seasons taught early humans that danger could be slow. Not every threat arrived with teeth, sound, or sudden weather. Some dangers came gradually. Fewer edible plants, thinner animals, colder mornings, longer searches for water, weaker bodies, shorter days, damp sleeping places, or a fire that became harder to keep alive because dry wood was scarce. A slow danger is difficult for the mind because it does not always create one clear moment of alarm. It builds quietly. It asks people to notice small changes before they become a crisis. This may have been one of the deepest ways seasonal fear shaped human thought. It trained attention toward beginnings. The first frost, the first failed search, the first unusually empty place, the first sign that animals had moved away, the first night when cold entered the shelter more sharply than before. These were not just events, they were possible warnings. The mind had to decide whether they belonged to an ordinary turn of the year or to something more difficult. This kind of fear is not loud. It is a watchful fear, a fear that listens. For early humans, such watchfulness may have been useful because seasonal hardship often gave signs before it fully arrived. But it also required balance. If every small change was treated as disaster, the group would waste strength. If signs were ignored for too long, the group might lose the chance to prepare. So seasonal fear may have helped shape a mind that could live between calm and concern. It had to remain awake without becoming overwhelmed. This is directly connected to the central question of the video, because a mind shaped by seasons learned that danger is not only a thing in the world, it is also a relationship between timing, body, memory, and place. A dry river is not equally frightening in every season. A cold wind is not equally serious for every group. A missing food source does not mean the same thing when other foods are available, as it does when the body is already weak. The mind had to read the whole situation. It had to ask what this sign meant now, in this part of the year, for these people with this amount of strength left. That kind of thinking is careful, contextual, and deeply human. Seasonal fear also taught that relief could be slow. Just as danger did not always arrive at once, safety did not always return at once. A warmer day did not mean the cold season was finished. A little rain did not mean food had returned. A longer evening did not mean travel was suddenly easy. The mind had to hold fear gently while waiting for stronger signs of change. This may have shaped emotional endurance. Early humans needed to stay responsive through long periods when the world was not yet safe, but not fully hopeless either. That middle state may be one of the oldest emotional landscapes of human life. It is the feeling of watching the sky, checking the ground, listening to the group, measuring strength, and waiting for the year to shift enough to act. We should not turn this into a simple story where fear always made people wiser. Fear can narrow attention too much. It can make the mind cling to old patterns, distrust new signs, or act too quickly. But seasonal life offered repeated correction. If a feared change passed without disaster, the mind could learn. If a small warning was ignored and hardship followed, the memory could deepen. Over many generations, this cycle of warning, response, error, and adjustment may have made fear less like a single reaction and more like a form of seasonal awareness. It became tied to preparation, memory, social trust, and the ability to stop before the body had no strength left. In the long story of the human mind, this matters because fear did not only teach humans to escape, it taught them to notice thresholds. When a place was becoming unsafe, when a season was turning, when a group was too tired, when a path was closing, when the old plan needed to change. These thresholds were rarely exact. They had to be felt, discussed, remembered, and tested. Long before, planning begins when the mind accepts that tomorrow can be changed by what is done today. In a seasonal world, this was not a luxury. It was a quiet necessity. For early humans, the future did not arrive as a clean idea. It arrived as cold air before the hardest cold, as shorter light before long darkness, as fewer foods before hunger deepened, as animal movement before a valley became empty, as rain before rivers rose. The seasons gave the future signs, and those signs invited preparation. A group that noticed cold coming might gather more fuel, repair shelter, prepare hides, stay closer to reliable fire, or choose a resting place with better protection from wind. A group that sensed dry conditions might remember water sources, reduce unnecessary movement, or shift toward places where plants, animals, or shade were more likely to remain. These were not modern plans written down in steps. They were practical arrangements made through memory, habit, observation, and shared experience. But they still show planning. They show the mind acting in the present because of a condition that has not fully arrived. This is directly connected to how the seasons shaped the human mind, because seasonal change made preparation meaningful. If the world were always the same, planning would be simpler. But a world that changes in repeating ways asks the mind to look ahead. It asks people to repair tools before they break at the worst time, gather dry wood before rain makes it harder, keep fire alive when cold will make warmth more precious, and move before weakness makes movement more difficult. Planning did not require certainty. In fact, it often existed because certainty was impossible. The season might become harsh, or it might soften. The herd might return, or shift away. Rain might come when expected, or arrive late. Because of this, early planning had to be flexible. A good plan was not a fixed command. It was a readiness to respond. This kind of readiness may have been one of the important mental habits created by seasonal life. The mind learned that small actions now could protect the body later. A sharpened tool, a remembered shelter, a stored ember, a prepared wrap of hide, a route kept in mind, a warning from an elder, a slower pace before exhaustion, each one connected, present effort to future need. The season made that connection visible again and again. It taught that waiting alone was not enough. Hope needed preparation beside it. A returning food could be missed if people were too weak or too far away. A safer shelter could be useless if the group left too late. A known water source could fail if no one remembered another. So planning grew from the tension between trust and uncertainty. The mind trusted that some patterns might return, but it also prepared for the possibility that they might not return as before. This is a careful point. We should not imagine early humans as modern strategists with perfect long-range schedules. Their planning was likely local, embodied, and shaped by immediate conditions. It was carried in repeated practices: where to camp, what to carry, when to leave, when to slow down, how to share work, how to keep children near, how to protect fire, how to use what the land offered before it disappeared. Yet this kind of planning is not small. It is the foundation of future-oriented life. It means the mind is no longer trapped inside the moment's hunger or comfort. It can sense that today's ease may become tomorrow's risk, and today's effort may become tomorrow's safety. The seasons taught this lesson without words. They made abundance temporary. They made hardship return. They made signs appear before outcomes. And each time people responded, the mind practiced a deeper skill, preparing for a world that was not yet here. Long before calendars gave names to future days, the turning year gave humans reasons to think ahead, to act early, and to understand that survival often depends on what is done before the need becomes visible. Planning became more powerful when it moved from a single action into a pattern of small preparations. For early humans, surviving a difficult season was rarely the result of one dramatic decision. More often, it may have depended on many quiet choices made before hardship fully arrived. A tool repaired before a long journey, a sheltered place remembered before cold rain came, dry wood gathered before weather turned wet, animal hides softened, carried, or arranged before nights became sharper. A fire watched carefully, because losing it in the wrong season could make life harder. These actions were simple on the surface, but together they show a mind learning to live ahead of the present. The season taught that the future could be approached through small acts. This matters deeply for the question of how seasons shape the human mind, because planning is not only thinking about what will happen, it is changing behavior now because of what might happen later. A hungry body may want to use energy immediately. A tired body may want to stop preparing. But seasonal knowledge could remind the group that the world would not remain as it was. The warm day might be followed by a cold night. The dry ground might become mud. The generous place might become empty. The mind had to hold this future pressure while the present still seemed manageable. That is not easy. It requires memory, restraint, and trust in patterns learned over time. Seasonal planning also depended on the materials of the world. Early humans did not prepare with modern storage rooms, written lists, or fixed buildings. They prepared with what they could carry, make, repair, remember, and share. Stone tools, wooden implements, bone, fibre, hides, fire, shelters, paths, and knowledge of food sources all became part of planning. A group might not store large amounts of food in the way later farming communities did, but it could store readiness, a known route, a prepared tool, a chosen camp, a memory of where dry wood might be found, a habit of moving before a place failed. Readiness is a quiet form of wealth in a seasonal world. It does not always look like possession. Sometimes it looks like knowing what to do when the land changes. This kind of planning also shaped social life. Preparation was rarely only one person's burden. Someone noticed weather. Someone remembered a route. Someone shaped or repaired a tool. Someone cared for children while others searched. Someone kept the fire. Someone recognized when an older person was becoming too cold or too tired. The season made these roles matter, because failure in one small area could spread into the whole group. If no one gathered fuel before rain, warmth might become harder. If no one remembered a safer crossing, travel might become riskier. If no one noticed that food was thinning, the group might wait too long. Planning therefore trained attention toward connection. A future problem was not isolated. Cold affected sleep. Sleep affected strength. Strength affected travel. Travel affected food. And food affected the ability to care for others. The mind shaped by seasons had to understand these chains, even if it never named them in abstract language. It learned that one condition touches another. This is one of the oldest roots of careful thinking. The seasons showed early humans that life is woven, not separate. A change in light could change movement. A change in movement could change hunger. A change in hunger could change emotion. A change in emotion could change cooperation. Planning was the mental act of seeing some of these connections before they became painful. We should be cautious, of course, not to exaggerate. Early humans did not control the seasons. They could prepare, but they could not command rain, warmth, animal movement, or plant growth. Their planning was always humble before uncertainty. That humility may have been part of its wisdom. Seasonal planning did not teach the mind that it could master nature completely. It taught something more realistic. Attention can reduce danger. Preparation can. Planning also changed how early humans understood responsibility. In a seasonal world, a decision made too late could burden everyone. If the group waited until cold had already deepened, finding dry fuel or better shelter might become harder. If people ignored signs of thinning food, hunger could weaken the young, the old, and those already tired from movement. If tools were neglected during easier days, they might fail when repair was more difficult. The season made delay visible in the body. It taught that the future is not separate from the present. What is ignored now can return later as difficulty. What is prepared now can return later as safety. This is directly connected to the way seasons shape the human mind, because planning does not only require memory, it requires care for a future self and a future group. Early humans had to think of bodies that would be colder later, hungrier later, more tired later, less able to move later. This kind of thought asks the mind to extend sympathy forward in time. A person gathering wood before night is, in a quiet way, caring for the people who will sit in darkness later. A person repairing a tool before travel is caring for the need that has not yet arrived. A person remembering a sheltered place is carrying protection before protection is needed. In this sense, seasonal planning may have helped turn foresight into a social habit. It was not only about surviving tomorrow, it was about making tomorrow less harsh for everyone who had to enter it. This matters because human planning is often emotional before it is technical. The mind must feel that the future deserves attention. The seasons gave strong reasons for that feeling. Cold would come whether people felt ready or not. Darkness would arrive whether the day's work was finished or not. Food could vanish whether the group had noticed the signs or not. These repeated facts may have made preparation feel necessary, even ordinary. Over many generations, people could learn that a calm season was not a reason to stop thinking. It was a chance to prepare while the body still had strength. This is one of the deeper lessons of seasonal life. Ease can be useful if it is not mistaken for permanence. A generous day can help protect a difficult one. A full stomach can give strength for gathering, repairing, teaching, and moving before hunger returns. A mild season can allow the group to learn routes, shape tools, and care for those who may struggle when conditions change. The mind shaped by seasons learned that comfort and caution can live together. It did not need to fear every good moment, but it also could not forget that good moments pass. Seasonal planning also taught humility. Even careful preparation could fail. A storm could arrive harder than expected. Animals could move differently. A known water source could dry. A shelter could be occupied, damaged, or too far away. A person could fall ill. Because of this, planning had to remain open. It could not become a rigid belief that the future had already been solved. A mind trained by seasons had to prepare and then keep watching. It had to say, "This is what usually happens, but let us see what is happening now." That balance between preparation and attention is one of the most valuable forms of intelligence. It prevents the past from becoming a prison and the future from becoming a fantasy. It keeps thought close to evidence. For early humans, evidence was not written in books. It was written in weather, tracks, light, water, animal bodies, plant growth, and human tiredness. To plan well was to read these signs without pretending they were perfect. In this way, the seasons may have shaped a mind that could imagine the future while still respecting the present. They taught that tomorrow can be influenced, but not controlled. They taught that care begins before crisis. They taught that readiness can be shared. And they taught that the human mind becomes stronger when it does not wait for hardship to speak loudly before it starts to listen. A season was never experienced by one mind alone. For early humans, the changing year passed through the group. Cold did not touch only one skin. Hunger did not ask only one stomach to wait. Darkness did not close around only one pair of eyes. A long, wet period, a dry season, a time of returning animals, or a stretch of short light changed the behavior of everyone who lived together. This is why the seasons may have shaped not only individual memory and planning, but shared life itself. A group had to decide where to rest, when to move, how far to travel, who needed care, who remembered a route, who could gather, who could carry, who could watch, who could teach. These decisions were not separate from the season. They were season moving through human relationships. A cold night made warmth more social. A scarce season made knowledge more valuable. A long journey made patience, with weaker bodies more important. A time of abundance could bring more movement, teaching, and repair before hardship returned. In this way, the seasons helped create a shared rhythm of attention. People did not simply notice the world as isolated individuals. They noticed together. One person might see a change in animal tracks. Another might remember that a certain plant returned after similar rains. Another might know which shelter stayed dry when the wind shifted. Another might sense that a child, an elder, or an injured person could not continue much farther. The group's mind became larger than any single mind because seasonal survival rewarded the sharing of observation. This is directly connected to the central question of how seasons shaped the human mind. Because the human mind developed inside social life, memory became more useful when it could be trusted by others. Fear became more manageable when it could be compared with another person's experience. Planning became stronger when different people carried different pieces of the same future. We should be careful not to imagine early human groups as perfectly peaceful or always wise. Human social life has always included tension, disagreement, competition, care, closeness, and conflict. But seasonal pressure likely made cooperation deeply valuable. When conditions were easy, a group might absorb mistakes more easily. When conditions were cold, dry, dark, or hungry, small failures could spread. Forgetting a route, losing fire, moving too late, ignoring weakness, or misreading a sign could affect many people. The season made dependence visible. It showed that survival was not only a personal achievement, it was something held between bodies. This shared dependence may have shaped emotion in quiet ways. A person might fear not only their own hunger, but the hunger of a child. Someone might remember not only where they had eaten before, but where the group could safely return. An older person's memory might become meaningful because it helped others endure a season they had never lived through. A young person's strength might matter because it carried food, fuel, or tools for more than one body. The seasons made these differences useful when they were brought together. They taught that no single person held the whole year. The year was too large for one memory, one strength, one pair of eyes. It had to be carried socially. This may be one of the quiet origins of human trust. Not trust as a simple feeling, but trust built from repeated seasons of being helped by another person's memory, warning, skill, or care. If someone remembered a dry season water source and the group survived because of it, memory became trust. If someone warned that cold was returning and preparation helped, attention became trust. If someone slowed the group because an elder could not keep pace, care became part of survival. Seasonal life did not make humans kind in a simple way, but it may have made kindness practical. It made attention to others a form of intelligence. Long before written rules, the changing year may have taught early humans that a mind becomes stronger when it is not alone. When memory is, shared seasons also shaped the way knowledge moved between generations. An early human child did not learn the year from a calendar on a wall or from a fixed lesson spoken once. The child learned by living through repeated changes with other people. They watched adults become more careful when daylight shortened. They saw the group gather nearer to warmth when cold deepened. They noticed that certain paths were taken only after rains, that certain foods were searched for only when the land gave the right signs. that some places were avoided when rivers rose or winds became harsh. In this way, the season became a teacher, but the group became the voice of that teacher. The young learned not only what the world did, but how older minds responded to it. This is directly connected to how seasons shaped the human mind, because human beings do not inherit survival knowledge only through instinct. They learn attention. They learn what matters by seeing what other people treat as meaningful. A bare tree might mean nothing to a child at first, until adults remember that it will matter later. A patch of mud might look ordinary, until someone points to tracks. A cold morning might feel only uncomfortable, until the group's behavior shows that it is part of a larger change. Seasonal knowledge therefore lived inside imitation, correction, memory, gesture, and eventually language. We cannot know the exact words used by very early humans in deep prehistory, and it would be dishonest to pretend we can. But we can say that social learning is central to human life, and seasonal environments would have given that learning repeated content. There was always something to notice again. Light, water, animal movement, plant growth, wind, shelter, hunger, fatigue, return. Older people may have carried special value because they had seen more variation. A young adult might know the ordinary pattern of a place, but an older person might remember the year when rain came late, when animals shifted, when cold lasted longer, or when a fallback food became important. In a seasonal world, rare memories could matter. They could prevent the group from treating one difficult season as completely unknown. This does not mean every elder was always right, or that every group always listened well. Human communities are complex. But the seasons gave long experience a practical weight. They made time itself something a person could carry for others. The group also shaped memory by repeating actions together. Returning to a shelter, following a route, preparing firewood, watching a river, gathering a seasonal food, slowing for the vulnerable. These repeated behaviors could become shared habits. A habit is memory made visible. It allows knowledge to survive even when no one explains it fully. A child who walks the same route in the same kind of weather learns the rhythm in the legs before it becomes a clear thought. A younger person who helps repair tools before a difficult journey learns that preparation belongs before need. A group that gathers close during long darkness teaches that safety can be social. This shared learning may have helped early humans feel the year not only as change, but as belonging. The season was not faced by one mind alone. It was carried in the group's movements, pauses, warnings, and routines. That may be one reason seasonal life could shape emotion so deeply. Fear became easier to hold when others recognized the same signs. Waiting became easier when older memory said that return had happened before. Hope became more grounded when it was shared through practice rather than spoken as certainty. The seasons taught people to remember together, and shared memory can make time feel less empty. It gives the future a path back into the past. Long before written history, before farming calendars, before named months, human groups were already preserving seasonal knowledge in bodies and relationships. They were teaching one another how to read a changing world. And through that teaching, the human mind was not only learning the seasons. Shared seasons may also have shaped the feeling of belonging. A group that has passed through cold, hunger, long darkness, movement, and returned together does not remember the year in the same way as a stranger passing through once. The land becomes marked by shared experience. A shelter is not only a shelter, it is where people stayed close through a wet season. A river bend is not only water, it is where the group waited for the level to fall, or found food when another place failed. A ridge is not only stone and wind, it is where people looked across a valley and decided whether to continue. These places carry memory because people lived through them together. For early humans, seasonal belonging may have grown from this shared contact with repeated hardship and repeated relief. The season did not only ask individuals to remember, it gave the group common points of reference. Everyone could feel the shortening light. Everyone could notice the cold returning. Everyone could see when certain foods appeared again. Everyone could recognize when a familiar place no longer gave what it once had. This shared noticing may have helped create a common mental world. People did not need identical thoughts, but they needed enough shared understanding to move, wait, prepare, and rest together. This is directly connected to how the seasons shaped the human mind, because the human mind is strongly social. A person's sense of time can be shaped by what the group expects. If the group begins to gather fuel, a child learns that cold is becoming important. If the group slows movement before dark, a young person learns how daylight limits choice. If older adults speak or gesture with concern when water is low, others learn that a dry season is not just discomfort, but a signal. In this way, the season became part of social attention. It shaped what people looked at together and what they treated as meaningful. Over many generations, that shared attention could become culture in a broad and careful sense, not necessarily formal ceremonies or fixed beliefs, but repeated ways of living with the year. How people moved, how they divided tasks, how they cared for the vulnerable, how they remembered food places, how they watched weather, how they treated fire, how they taught children, and how they responded when the expected return did not come. We should be cautious here. We cannot claim exactly what every ancient group believed about seasons. Deep prehistory leaves limited evidence, and human groups were diverse. But it is reasonable to say that repeated seasonal experience gave human communities patterns to organize around. The year gave life a shape that could be shared. It created times when certain knowledge mattered more, when certain people's skills became more valuable, when certain places became central, and when the group had to adjust together. Shared seasons also may have shaped trust through repeated proof. Trust is not built only by words. It is built when someone's memory helps the group find water, when someone's warning helps avoid danger, when someone's patience prevents leaving too early, when someone's care keeps a weaker person alive through a hard time. A season tests these forms of trust again and again. The group learns whose attention is careful, whose memory is deep, whose courage is useful, whose fear should be listened to, and whose calm can steady others. These are not small matters. They are part of how a social mind forms. The changing year may have taught early humans that no one survives time alone. The young need the old, the strong need the observant, the bold need the cautious, the hungry need the remembering, the tired need the patient. In easier times, these connections may be less visible. In difficult seasons, they become clearer. This is one of the quiet truths seasonal life may have placed inside human communities. Difference can become survival when it is held together. The group becomes a living memory of the year, larger than one body and longer than one lifetime. And because seasons renew, a pattern begins when the mind notices that change is not pure chaos. For early humans, the seasons may have offered one of the clearest forms of this lesson. The world did not simply shift once and vanish into something unknown. Light shortened, then returned. Cold deepened, then softened. Certain foods disappeared, then appeared again. Animals left, then sometimes passed back through. Rivers rose, fell, froze, dried, or opened according to conditions that could be remembered, though never perfectly controlled. Over many generations, these repeated changes may have helped the mind form a deeper sense that nature had rhythms. This was not the same as a modern calendar. It was not an exact count of days. It was a lived recognition that the world had a memory of its own. Something could go away and come back. Something could be absent and still belong to the future. Something could be expected without being guaranteed. This is directly connected to how the seasons shape the human mind, because recognizing pattern changes the way a person experiences the present. A cold morning is different when it is felt as part of a larger turn. An empty tree is different when the mind remembers fruit. A long night is different when the body knows that nights have lengthened before and later shortened again. The present becomes thicker. It holds traces of what came before and hints of what may come next. For early humans, this ability would have mattered in ordinary survival, but it may also have shaped a more inward understanding of time. The mind could begin to sense that life was not only a chain of separate events, it was a movement of returns, delays, losses, and changes. A place could be known across more than one moment. A food could be remembered through its absence. A danger could be prepared for before it fully appeared. A relief could be hoped for because something like it had happened before. These are quiet mental shifts, but they are profound. They suggest that the seasons did not merely give early humans information, they gave them a structure for expectation. Still, this structure was never simple. If every season had repeated exactly, the mind might have learned fixed rules. But real seasons vary. Rain comes early or late, cold lasts longer or ends sooner. Animals shift their paths. Plants fail in one place and flourish in another. A river behaves differently after a storm, a drought, or a warm period. Because of this, early humans had to recognize pattern without becoming trapped by it. They had to learn the difference between rhythm and certainty. That difference may be one of the most important lessons in human thought. A rhythm can guide you, but it cannot promise you. A remembered season can help, but it cannot replace attention. This kind of thinking kept the mind close to evidence. The year taught comparison. This is like before, but not exactly. This sign usually means change, but the other signs are different. This place once gave food, but now the land is telling another story. In this way, seasonal life may have trained a balanced intelligence, one that could trust memory while still listening to the present. The pattern in nature became a pattern in the mind, but it remained flexible. It carried humility. It said, "The world has repeated, and yet the world is alive." This may be why seasons were such powerful teachers before formal knowledge existed. They offered order without complete control. They allowed the mind to anticipate without owning the future. They made time feel circular in some ways, but never closed. A year returned, but not as the same year. A place returned, but not as the same place. A person returned to it older, changed by hunger, loss, skill, memory, and care. So the pattern was never only outside. It was also inside the people who lived through it. Each season left a trace in the body and the group. Each return was compared with earlier returns. Each difference became part of knowledge. Long before written records, the human mind may have begun to understand the world through this gentle. To see a pattern in the seasons is also to begin separating change from disorder. This may have been one of the quiet mental thresholds in early human life. When a cold period arrived once, it could feel like suffering. When it arrived again, with signs before it, the mind could begin to understand it as part of a larger movement. When fruit vanished once, it was loss. When fruit vanished and later returned, absence became something more complex. When animals moved away once, it was uncertainty. When their movement was seen again across repeated years, the land began to hold a hidden order. For early humans, this hidden order was never written in numbers. It lived in remembered sensations, the kind of air before rain, the light at a certain part of the year, the smell of thawing ground, the sound of insects returning, the look of tracks in mud rather than dust, the way the body felt when nights slowly became shorter. These signs could make the world feel less random, even when it remained unpredictable. This is directly connected to how seasons shaped the human mind, because a mind that senses pattern begins to treat the present as a clue. The present is no longer only what is happening. It becomes evidence of where the world may be in its turning. A dry stream is not only a dry stream. It asks what came before, what usually comes next, and whether this dry period is ordinary or dangerous. A returning bird, a new plant shoot, a warmer wind, or an early frost can become more than a detail. It can become a sign placed inside memory. This kind of thinking may have helped early humans build a practical sense of time before formal timekeeping. Time was not yet divided into measured units. It was recognized through change in living things. A year could be felt through the body's contact with repeating conditions. The mind did not need a calendar to know that some moments belonged near hunger, some near movement, some near waiting, some near return. But because seasons varied, this sense of time had to remain open. It was not a closed circle, it was a rhythm with differences inside it. That may have taught a deeper lesson. Repetition does not mean sameness. The same cold is never exactly the same cold. The same path is never exactly the same path. The same fruiting place is never exactly the same place, because the weather, animals, people, and bodies have all changed. A group returning to a known shelter might bring new children, older elders, different injuries, sharper tools, weaker bodies, stronger memories. The season returned, but the people had moved forward. This meeting of return and change may have shaped the human sense of life itself. Humans could feel that the world comes back, but they also knew that no return fully restores what was before. That is a very old and very human understanding. It can make memory tender as well as useful. A place where food returned might also be a place where someone once struggled through hunger. A warm season might bring relief, but also the memory of the cold that came before it. A familiar path might bring confidence, but also the awareness of those who once walked it and no longer did. We do not need to invent dramatic beliefs to see the depth of this. The seasons alone, repeated through human bodies and human groups, were enough to teach that time has layers. The mind could hold the returning world and the changing self together. This may be one reason human beings became so sensitive to cycles. Day and night, hunger and fullness, danger and safety, leaving and returning, loss and renewal. Seasonal life gave these cycles a broad outer shape. It showed that the world itself moved through phases, and once the mind begins to recognize phases outside, it may begin to recognize phases inside. Energy rising and falling, fear tightening and loosening, hope fading and returning, memory becoming clearer when a sign appears again. The seasons did not give early humans a finished philosophy of time. They gave something older, repeated experience, strong enough to become inner structure. The more the mind recognizes pattern, the more it begins to ask what a sign means before the outcome arrives. This may have been one of the most important mental changes encouraged by seasonal life. A sign is not the event itself. A cold wind is not the whole cold season. A swelling bud is not yet fruit. A track in soft ground is not the animal standing before the group. A longer evening is not yet the full return of warmth. But signs pull the mind forward. They ask it to connect what is seen now with what may be coming. For early humans, this connection could shape survival in quiet ways. A group that noticed early signs of change could prepare before need became urgent. It could move before a place became empty, gather before weather shifted, wait before crossing, or trust that a currently barren place might soon open again. In this sense, the seasons may have taught the human mind to live inside symbols before formal symbols existed. Not symbols written on stone or counted in marks, but natural signs: light, wind, animal movement, plant growth, water level, soil, sound, smell, and the condition of the body itself. Each sign became meaningful because it belonged to a pattern remembered across time. This is directly connected to the central question of how seasons shaped the human mind, because a mind that reads signs is a mind that does not live only in the immediate surface of the world. It begins to sense hidden movement beneath visible change. The world becomes layered. What is seen now may point to something not yet seen. What is absent now may still be preparing to return. What feels safe now may be slowly becoming risky. This kind of thinking is deeply practical, but it also opens the door to more reflective forms of human awareness. If the land has signs, then attention matters. If signs can be misunderstood, then humility matters. If a sign has meaning only when compared with memory, then shared experience matters. The seasons made meaning depend on relationship. A dark cloud means one thing in a dry season, another in a wet one. A cool wind means one thing after heat, another before deeper cold. A missing animal trail means one thing when other foods are rich, another when hunger has already begun. The mind shaped by seasons had to read context, not just objects. This may have helped develop a more flexible kind of intelligence, the ability to hold many clues together without forcing them into one answer too soon. We should be careful not to overstate what can be known. We cannot say exactly when early humans first became conscious of seasonal pattern in a reflective way. We cannot enter their thoughts directly, but we can see that human survival depended on memory, prediction, social learning, and attention to environmental change. The seasons gave these abilities a repeated field of practice. Again and again, the mind met signs, compared them with past experience, acted, waited, corrected itself, and learned. Over generations, this could make pattern recognition feel natural. The turning year became part of how people understood the world. It may also have shaped how people understood themselves. If the land had times of strain and times of return, so did the body. If the group had times of movement and times of closeness, so did emotion. If nature could change slowly before anyone named the change, then perhaps inner life also had beginnings before words. A person might feel unease before hardship was visible, relief before abundance fully returned, patience when signs suggested waiting, or caution when a familiar place felt different. Seasonal pattern taught that feeling could be tied to time. It gave emotion a place inside the year. This is why the seasons were not only outside the mind. They became a structure through which the mind could organize expectation, memory, fear, hope, and care. Before calendars, the year was not an idea placed over life. It was life itself returning in altered form. It taught early humans that the world speaks gradually, through signs that must be watched, remembered, shared. What the seasons left inside the human mind did not vanish when people later built shelters, counted days, planted crops, made calendars, or filled the night with artificial light. The relationship changed, but it did not disappear completely. Human beings still live in bodies that respond to light, darkness, temperature, hunger, rest, movement, and repetition. A modern person may wake by an alarm rather than by dawn, buy food from a market rather than follow its growth across the land, and move through the year by schedules rather than by animal tracks, rainfall, or ripening plants. Yet beneath those modern layers, the older body remains. It still notices shorter days. It still feels the weight of long darkness. It still changes with sleep, warmth, cold, and the rhythm of activity and rest. This does not mean the modern mind is the same as the mind of early humans. It is not. Culture, technology, medicine, cities, agriculture, writing, and electricity have transformed human life in profound ways. But the central truth remains gentle and important. The human mind was never separate from the living world. It was shaped inside weather, light, hunger, waiting, danger, care, and return. The seasons may have taught early humans some of the first deep habits of thought: to remember what is absent, to prepare before need becomes urgent, to wait without giving up, to fear without being ruled by fear, to trust patterns without pretending they are certain, and to share memory with others. These are not small things. They are part of what still makes human life recognizable. When people today feel a certain mood with the first cold morning, or a quiet relief when warmer light returns, or a pull toward reflection during long evenings, they may be feeling a distant echo of the old relationship between body and year. We should be careful not to turn this into a simple story where every modern feeling comes from prehistoric seasons. Human emotions have many causes. Personal history, health, community, work, stress, age, place, and culture all matter. But it is reasonable to say that seasonal change remains one of the deep backgrounds of human experience. Light affects sleep and alertness. Weather affects movement and routine. The time of year can influence what people remember, how they gather, how they rest, and how they imagine the future. In that sense, the seasons did not stop shaping the mind when calendars arrived. Calendars gave the year names and numbers, but they did not replace the body's older listening. A date can tell someone that winter has begun, but the body may know it through the skin, through the length of evening, through the desire to stay inside, through slower energy, through memory of other years. A calendar can mark spring, but the mind may feel it first as more light, more movement, more possibility. This is one of the quiet lessons of the whole story. Human time has two layers. One layer is measured: days, months, years, appointments, deadlines, clocks. The other layer is lived: cold returning, light widening, hunger changing, bodies aging, memories rising when the world repeats something familiar. Early humans lived much closer to the second layer. Modern humans often live under the first, but both layers still meet inside us. That meeting may explain why the seasons remain emotionally powerful, even when they no longer control survival in the same direct way. They remind the mind that life is not only a straight line forward, it is also made of returns, changes, thresholds, and quiet repetitions. The first humans did not need to define this in words. They learned it by living. They felt that the world could close and open, empty and fill, darken and brighten, harden and soften. And as the world moved through those changes, the mind learned to move with it. If the seasons left something inside the human mind, it may be this: the ability to live with change without needing change to become meaningless. Early humans saw the world alter again and again, but not in a way that erased memory. A cold season could come after warmth, yet warmth was not forgotten. A dry place could become useful again, yet its emptiness was not ignored. A hard time could pass, yet the body remembered that hard times return. This balance between memory and change may be one of the deepest mental habits shaped by seasonal life. The mind learned that the present is real, but not complete. What is happening now matters, but it does not contain the whole story of the world. A bare tree may still belong to fruit. A silent valley may still belong to animals. A long night may still belong to the return of dawn. For early humans, this was not poetry first. It was survival knowledge. But over many generations, survival knowledge can become a way of feeling life. The seasons taught that absence does not always mean ending, and return does not always mean sameness. That lesson is still useful. In modern life, people often live under pressures that make time feel flat and hurried. Days are divided by clocks, messages, work, noise, and artificial light. Many people are no longer forced to watch the land carefully to know when food will return or when travel will become dangerous. Yet the mind still struggles with the same older questions in quieter forms. How do we endure a difficult period without believing it will last forever? How do we enjoy a good period without forgetting that it, too, will change? How do we prepare without becoming afraid of everything? How do we hope without pretending certainty? These questions are not separate from the story of seasons. They may be part of what the seasons taught the human mind long before they were expressed in language. A seasonal mind is not a mind that expects life to be easy. It is a mind that understands rhythm. It knows that strength rises and falls, attention opens and narrows, groups gather and separate, fear comes and goes, hope fades and returns. This does not make suffering harmless. Hunger, cold, loss, illness, and danger were real in the ancient world, and they are real in different forms today. But seasonal thinking gives suffering a frame without denying it. It says that conditions can be powerful without being permanent. It says that preparation matters before hardship, patience matters during hardship, and memory matters after hardship. This is where the educational value of the story begins to appear. The seasons remind us that the human mind was shaped not only by success, but by repeated adjustment. Early humans did not survive because they controlled everything. They survived because they noticed, remembered, shared, adapted, and stayed responsive. They learned from light, darkness, weather, food, movement, and one another. They learned that the future is never fully known, but it is not completely blind. It can be approached with care. A person can gather strength before a difficult time. A group can protect the vulnerable before danger becomes loud. A memory can keep hope alive without turning hope into a false promise. This is a humble lesson, and it matters because it is truthful. Nature did not shape the human mind by giving easy answers. It shaped the mind by repeating questions. Is it time to move? Is it time to wait? Is this sign enough? Has this happened before? What must be protected now so that life can continue later? Even today, beneath calendars and electric light, these questions have not fully left us. They return whenever we face a change we cannot command. Number. They return when a season of life becomes colder, darker, slower, or uncertain. And perhaps the older mind inside us still knows something gentle. Change is not always an enemy. Sometimes change is the rhythm by which life teaches attention, patience, and care. The seasons did not give the human mind a single answer. They gave it a way of listening. They taught early humans to feel the world as movement, not as a fixed stage beneath their feet. Cold came, but it did not explain itself. Hunger came, but it did not say how long it would stay. Light returned, but it did not promise that every path would open. Animals moved, plants vanished, rivers changed, and the group had to live inside those changes with memory, caution, and care. This may be the most truthful way to understand the question of how seasons shape the human mind. They did not shape it like a tool pressed into one form forever. They shaped it through repetition, pressure, uncertainty, and return. They asked the body to notice. They asked memory to hold what was gone. They asked fear to become attention. They asked hope to stay close to evidence. They asked people to share what one mind alone could not carry. A season was never just weather. It was a lesson in timing, a lesson in limits, a lesson in dependence, a lesson in the deep connection between the outer world and the inner life. Before calendars, the mind learned that time could be felt in the skin, in the stomach, in the length of a shadow, in the weight of darkness, in the silence of a place where food had once been, and in the relief of something returning after absence. That lesson still has value now. Modern life often teaches people to treat time as something to control, to schedule, measure, divide, accelerate, and fill. But the older lesson is quieter. It says that not every season of life can be rushed. Some things must be prepared for before they arrive. Some things must be endured while they are still unfinished. Some things return only after long waiting. Some losses change us even when life opens again. And some hopes are strongest when they are not pretending to be guarantees. This is not a call to live like early humans, and it is not a romantic picture of the past. Their lives could be difficult, uncertain, and physically demanding in ways many people today do not face directly. But their closeness to the seasons can remind us of something honest. The human mind became strong, not by escaping change, but by learning how to live with it. It learned to observe before judging. It learned to remember without clinging too tightly. It learned to prepare without believing preparation controls everything. It learned that fear can warn, but should not rule. It learned that hope can guide, but should remain humble. It learned that no person carries time alone, because memory, patience, and care become stronger when shared. If there is an educational message at the end of this story, it is this. Human beings are not separate from nature, even when technology makes distance feel possible. The rhythms of light, rest, hunger, weather, aging, loss, and return still move through us. To understand the seasons is not only to understand the past, it is to understand why the mind needs rhythm, why the body needs rest, why memory matters, and why patience is not weakness when it is joined with attention. The first humans did not stand outside the year and study it from afar. They lived inside it. They were shaped by its cold and warmth, its scarcity and abundance, its silence and return. And somewhere in that long relationship, the human mind learned to ask not only what is happening now, but what this moment may become. Because when the seasons began to shape the human mind, did they only teach humans how to survive the year, or did they teach us how to understand change itself?